sentence 18 infers that it means, open my eyes and let me behold the wonders of your Torah, which basically helps at this point for us to be able to use the media, audio, video, writing, any form of communication, to bring out the inner and deeper dimensions of the Torah. And we publish books, cassettes, we're in the process of producing some videos of lectures. We have classes throughout Israel in Hebrew and in English in various centers, and as of recently we've been invited to the States, in various different places in Los Angeles and San Francisco and here and other places would like us to come. And basically the method of approach is inspiration rather than obligation. To open the eyes means to prepare something for the people to be able to appreciate the inner depths. So Rabbi Ginzburg is the founder of the organization. Right, okay. And the center at the moment is in Yerushalayim and in Kfar Chabad. And a part of the Galilei organization is a yeshiva, which is based in Shechem, which is where Yosef HaTzadik and his two sons are buried. And that building has been neglected for years till about 6 years ago.
Actually started 10 years ago.
10 years ago. We came a little bit later. And it was revived, and now it's become a center of learning, both of the Nigleh of the Torah, Talmud, Chumash, and everything else, as well as Hasidut and Kabbalah. And the students come from various walks of life, from Israel, from kibbutzim, from Hesder yeshivas, Baalei Tshuva, from America, Russia, have chosen as the place of learning. And nearby there is a settlement called Yitzhar, which is up on a mountain, and that's where everyone communes, yeah? Goes to sleep. Because we're not allowed to stay in Shechem past 10 o'clock because of the army regulations. So we're the first Jewish presence there, who knows how long, and we hope to be able to expand that so we can stay there till after 10 and early in the morning and make it a settlement, a viable settlement. Rabbi Ginzburg is the Rosh Hashiva there. Thank you.
Okay, this evening the topic is Kabbalah and science. I have some background in science, but I don't claim to be a professional scientist, so people will forgive me if it's not exactly 100% the way maybe some of you know much better than I, as far as the scientific background. The basic idea that I'd like to speak about today, and also to hear at the end and maybe even in the middle if there's some very pressing questions, or certainly open to questions, answers, to discussion, that there will be a good discussion here. I'd like to take three topics, three concepts from modern science, and show the parallel between these ways of thinking, these patterns of thought, and the parallel pattern of thought that appears in the work, the writings, and the tradition of Kabbalah. And the idea is, as was maybe mentioned before, or put up on the posters also, that the closer we're coming to the rectification of our understanding of reality of the world, the closer science in its terminology, in its thought patterns, especially in its thought patterns, is coming very, very close to the same basic frames of reference, ideas, concepts, transcending what was previously considered to be common sense. Now things which are not common sense are understood as being almost axiomatic truths. This ability to transcend what's called the Hava Amina, one's first imagination of reality, and to delve deep and to reveal other patterns and deeper frames of reference. As we'll try to explain now this evening, this exactly meets and kisses, is a term that we use, the thought patterns of Kabbalah and Hasidut. The three basic ideas that we're going to speak about this evening are the quest for unity. Second, the concept of consciousness as an active force, as an active creative force, as understood now in modern physics as well. Consciousness. And third, the principle of rest, or of the physical reality seeking to descend or fall to the lowest energy level. It's one of the basic principles of modern science. We call it the rest principle. It has to do with entropy and other phenomena. But even when explained in text, it's as water that seeks to descend and rest at the lowest possible level, or the lowest energy level. In fact, as far as the whole universe is concerned, so there's even maybe a difference of opinion amongst the greatest scientists today whether the universe as a totality has already reached its lowest energy level, or maybe there might yet be a fall, that in which such event there might be a fall, the whole nature of reality would instantaneously change. The whole world would collapse and fall into a different state of being totally. Most of the scientists, as far as I understand, do believe that the present state of creation of the world is in general, at its lowest energy level. But the fact that all reality seeks to descend and to reach this rest state of lowest energy level is a very, very basic, fundamental concept in modern science. So once more, the three thoughts that we're going to try to discuss this evening. One is the basis of, or the motivation of most scientists to occupy themselves in the discipline which is called cosmology, in their search for the unity of the forces that we find active in our physical world. As we know that Einstein, all of his life he spent trying to arrive at a unified field theory and was unsuccessful. But the quest, the drive to unify, to see the unity behind the plurality of forces that work in our world, this is a driving spiritual factor in the heart of the greatest Jewish scientist in our time, and after him, almost all scientists. A drive not to remain in a state of plurality, to seek unity. In the search for unity, the scientist understands that to discover unity is to go back in time, to the origin, to what he tries to understand as the origin of our universe, of our world. Why so? The normal explanation is that things come together due to tremendous degrees of heat, of temperature. That at the earliest moment of creation, everything was one due to the fact that everything was at a tremendously high level of temperature. And then things began to separate. That's exactly how it works. I'm now trying to speak from the way the scientific cosmology, its terminology. So we all have heard of the concept of Big Bang. there's a modern theory which has not yet been proved and apparently cannot yet be proved for a long, long time, if ever, which everybody's heard about probably. It's called string theory, that many great scientists today take seriously, many don't take seriously. In any event, in this theory, there are several, or more precisely, as I've read, 3 stages of the theoretic cosmology that precede what is called the Big Bang. The mathematics involved in all of this physics and cosmology is, whoever is a little bit familiar with mathematics is a little slightly more my field than the physics, is group theory. And the form that's used in group theory is symmetric groups. There's a very tremendous, a great emphasis on symmetry. It's called symmetric group theory. This is the basic mathematical model for all of the physics, all of the modern physics. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because of the word symmetry, symmetric group theory. Symmetric group theory is also has to do with permutations. It's something that's straight out of Sefer Yetzirah, the first classic text of Kabbalah. Group theory is the theory of permutations of letters, symmetric groups. The way that the creation began, according to the Kabbalah, is with the permutation of the letters of the alphabet. Because if I have 22 letters of the alphabet, there are 22 times 21 over 2, 231 different pairs of 2 different letters. This is a basic concept in Sefer Yetzirah, which is called Rela Sha'arim Leishlamid Aleph Sha'arim, the basis of all possible permutations. If this is expanded more, there's not just 2 letters, 3 letters, 4 letters, then it's a whole theory of permutation. Every letter is called a stone. Every word, every permutation of several letters is called a house. In the terminology once more of Sefer Yetzirah, 2 stones build 2 houses, 3 stones build 6 houses, 4 stones build 24 houses, and so forth and so on. It's called the factorial function in mathematics. It's 4 stones, there's 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, 24 different permutations. 5 stones is already 120 permutations, so forth. This basic mathematics of permutation, this is the mathematical model now for the fundamentals of physics, especially cosmology. Once more, cosmology is the means that the physicist uses to search for the initial unity of all forces and all levels of reality that we now find in our pluralistic experience of the world. The Kabbalah says that first Hashem performs an act which is called Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum HaRishon is the initial contraction. It's after God, as it were, considered and thought in himself, in his own mind as it were, all possible permutations of letters, which is actually the plan of the blueprint of creation to be. Then came a contraction, a tzimtzum of the infinite light, which left a vacuum in which the universe is to be created. Whether that tzimtzum is to be taken literally, that the light actually vanished and disappeared and left the black hole of the tzimtzum, or whether it's not meant to be taken literally, this is a machloket of the great Mekubalim. We know, probably all of us know, that the Baal Shem Tov and Hasidus very, very starchly declares that the Tzimtzum is not to be taken literally, Eina Tzimtzum Kipshuto, and it's only an appearance which appears to us that there is a vacuum in which the universe is created. Nonetheless, the effect of that act, which is called Tzimtzum, is to create the setting for creation. And what is the setting for creation? Space and time. But there first must be a setting which is space and time that for the time being has no matter, has no mass within this setting of creation. Now this is exactly what is theorized in this modern string theory in physics, that first, from unity and from symmetry, first something happens that creates space and time. Then another quantum-like leap happens, stage number 2. As there is spoken of, that the stage number 1 in creation is the creation of the initial setting of what is to be the universe, space and time. Stage number 2 is, once more, a slight asymmetry. All creation is a slight asymmetry. So long as there is symmetry, there's nothing. As soon as there's a slight asymmetry, then something happens. The first thing that happens is space and time. The second thing that happens is matter, mass, matter and energy. So actually we have 4 so far, 4 things. 2 which are 4, also a very classic model that appears in the Talmud many times, Shnaim Shem Arba. There's 2 basic concepts of reality which are actually 4. One is space, but space is space and time. Mathematically, even though it's 4-dimensional, but the dimension of time is not the same type of dimension as the 3-dimensional space. Mathematics is called an imaginary dimension. It's not a real dimension. It is different. So we have space, but space has two concepts connected, combined, space and time. And then there is matter, and as we know from Einstein, matter and energy are also equivalent, just 2 different forms of the same essence, the same substance. So we have 2 things, which is non-substance and substance. And each one of those 2, non-substance and substance, also has 2 elements to it. The 2 elements of the non-substance are space and time itself. And the 2 substantial elements are actually 2 different forms, 2 different faces of the same phenomenon, which are matter and energy. So here we already have a classic just in this thought itself. What is Kabbalah? What does the word Kabbalah mean? Probably all of us think or know that in Hebrew Kabbalah means to receive. But if we look in the Bible, the first appearance of the word Kabbalah is actually in this week's Torah reading. The famous concept that a person has to live, especially with the time, with the spiritual time, the Torah time, which is to connect everything that he hears and that he experiences throughout the week with the Torah reading. In this week's Torah reading, even in this very day's Torah reading, the day to come, we find the expression makbilot halulot, a word, the root, kabel, kuf bet lamed, which in later Hebrew means to receive. The original, the core, source meaning of this word kabel is parallel. Makbilot halulaot. That there are hooks or links, 50 links on one side of the yiriot, the ceiling of the Mishkan, and another 50 links on the other side, and the links were constructed one exactly opposite the other, one exactly parallel to the other. Da, in Aramaic, the term is very common. Da lekavel da. One parallel to the other. Why in later Hebrew, especially Megillat Esther, is also relevant to our time. And a week from now we're approaching the holiday of Purim. And Purim is the Megillat Esther is the one source in the Bible for this root kabel to appear in its more common sense, to receive. V'kibel ha-Yehudim asher echelu la'asot. That we received that which we had begun to do and to commit ourselves to with the giving of the Torah, our initial commitment to keep the Torah. We received it more so and greater and deeper and eternally because of the miracle of Purim and our Mesirut Nefesh, our dedication, devotion that preceded the miracle of Purim. So there it means the first time in the Tanakh that it means to receive, but in the Torah it just appears 2 times in reference to the tabernacle. And there it means not to receive, it means not yet to receive. It's the same concept that evolves. But the origin of the evolution of this concept is first parallel. Why does parallel afterwards come to mean receive, reception? Because to truly receive, as taught in Kabbalah, one has to be face to face. The receiver to the giver must be face to face. There's a little off bearings. There's not looking eye to eye, then the receiving is not bipnimiyut, it's simply superficial. It's the byproduct. It's not the essence of the life force, the light that is shining, projecting from the giver. So once more, this is the simple explanation, as explained also in the grammatical text of the Shon HaKodesh. And by the way, I'll just say that anything that has to do with the deep understanding of the language itself, there's no deeper Kabbalah, no deeper science than the secrets which are concealed within the language itself, the holy tongue. That was just b'derech hagav, by the way. But in our case, if we take the very word Kabbalah itself, Kabbalah means first to be paired 2 sets of objects to be parallel in particular, with all the elements of one set to be one, it's called one-to-one correspondence. One-to-one direct correspondence of one set to another set. The numbers of the 2 sets that are mentioned in the Torah are 50 to 50, just like Chamishim Sha'arei Binah. 50 on one side and 50 on the other side, and they link up one-to-one. And that's called Makbilot Halulot. It appears in Parashat Trumah here. Also appears later when the working of the tabernacle is repeated a 2nd time in the Torah. But it just appears in this context, in one single context of Makbilot Halulot.
Do you entertain questions as you go?
Okay.
Does this concept come earlier in the split between Abraham and God, when he laid out and walked between?
The word does not appear there.
Not appear. So there's not. So if the word isn't there, then the concept isn't there.
Yes, maybe a similar concept, but the word does not appear. The first appearance of this word is a very important principle in all of Torah understanding, that Hakol holech achar pticha. If you want to understand something, first look for its first appearance. Its first appearance is its foundation, its yesod. Everything else follows after the first appearance. The first and only, in this case, this is the only, in the whole 5 books of Moses, this is the one and only appearance of what afterwards in later Hebrew is one of the most common roots of the language. But the sense of kabel, meaning to receive, this is in rabbinic literature, almost in every Mishnah. Maybe not every Mishnah, but very, very common throughout the Mishnah and all of the rabbinic literature is the root kabel in the sense of to receive. But in the 5 books of Moses, it appears in only one context, repeated twice, but the same phrase, the same exact phrase, which means parallelism. Makbilot halulot. And once more, that's very close to its Aramaic counterpart, which is da lekabel da, in the idiom. one opposite, one corresponding to the other. So what does that teach us? It teaches that the whole wisdom of Kabbalah, which once more literally simply means to receive, but as a thought pattern, or as a sense of the soul, is the sense to identify correspondence. How does one sense correspondence? One has to have certain basic models or frames of reference, terms that we said before, to which everything corresponds. What is Kabbalah? Kabbalah teaches us that there are 10 sfirot, 10 lights. Almost every phenomenon of reality, whether it be a physical phenomenon or a psychological phenomenon of the soul, the structure of the soul, it all relates back to the basic frame of reference of 10 sfirot. Even a deeper, a primary frame of reference are the 4 letters of God's name, which actually means being itself, existence itself, havaya. Every aspect of existence relates back to us, as in this case, that we began talking about a phenomenon which is 2 that are actually 4. Shnayim shem arba. But non-substance reality, which was once more the initial setting, creation of the setting of the world, which is space and time, and then substance, which once more, substance is mass, which once more has two faces to it, that of matter and energy. At any one point in time-space, it assumes one of the 2 faces. Whereas time-space simultaneously exist together. But this is all to explain that the thought pattern, the shita, the method, the methodology of Kabbalah is to seek for parallel, meaning to take a phenomenon and see its a sense, to immediately identify based on these absolute models. It's not axioms, they're models. There's thought, there's many thought processes which are based on an axiomatic logical system. Kabbalah is not axiomatic, it's based on models, on basic models which are frames of reference, and once more that's what the word means, Kabbalah, the ability or the sense, the insight to identify correspondence. Called medamem milta lemilta. Like Gezeirah Shava in the Nigleh, one of the 13 midot that Torah is explained through is Gezeirah Shava. Gezeirah Shava is something actually Chazal themselves say that in order to know how to properly relate and correspond, say that since here we find a phrase and in a different context we find the same phrase, so that means there's something equal between the 2 different passages, even though they're dealing with different topics altogether. That is such a deep sense, you can either do it right or do it wrong, therefore you must actually receive it. This one deep way to understand also the relation between the parallel and the receiving from previous generation that says that to make a Gezerah Shava one must actually receive it Rebbe, Pi Rebbe, or Tamim Pi Rav, Ad Moshe Rabbeinu. Meaning that the Hush itself, to parallel, must derive from a source of, the ultimate source of oneness. But that Hush, what Kabbalah, what the wisdom, or once more the thought pattern of Kabbalah is a Hush of parallel. Once more, modern science, all of modern science, more and more tends to base itself also on basic models. And tries, attempts to relate Vos Mer in Yiddish, how much more different phenomenon to basic models, basic frames of reference. In Kabbalah, the greatest, the most ultimate frame of reference is that of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is also 2 that become 4. Be-Yud Kei Havaya Tzur Alamim. The verse says that first are just 2 letters, Yud and Hey. And then the Yud and the Hey become 4 letters, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Yud Kei Vav Kei. And it says, B'Yud Kei Vav Kei Tzur Olamim, that the creation of the universe is through this first duality of two letters that become or manifest themselves as four letters. Afterwards, a secondary frame of reference is 10 sfirot, 10 lights, 10 dimensions, which also reminds us exactly that all of these concepts very, very close fit into this new theory of string theory. That's why I'm talking about it. You know, once more, it hasn't been proved, but its hypotheses are very, very mind-arousing, especially for a student of Kabbalah, because it bases itself on 10 dimensions. It's a 10-dimensional theory. There was a scientist, one of the scientists that began this theory, since he's given up his hypothesis, hypothesized 26 dimensions to reality. It takes, the question is, how many dimensions does it take to make it work? And it can't be arbitrary. It can't be any number of dimensions. So one first thought, but this is all based on mathematics, on the deepest mathematics. One first hypothesis was that it takes 26 dimensions, which is actually the numerical value, as we know, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, of Hashem's name. The hypothesis which now is assumed by those that believe in this theory is that there must be no less and no more than exactly 10 dimensions. Which also makes the number 10 a most non-arbitrary choice for the base of the decimal system, also something which unfortunately is, as many, many things are taught in the wrong way from kindergarten through graduate school. The whole idea that numbers are arbitrary, and they say a decimal system, to base numbers on a decimal system, is an arbitrary choice and has no essential meaning whatsoever. This type of thought, the more that we find deep, essential phenomena of reality that do depend on a certain pure number, a non-dimensional number, meaning not inches and not seconds. It's called a pure number of physics. So that means that numbers are not arbitrary. That there's something essential about numbers. If the whole base of all of a unified, and what is string theory? String theory is also an attempt to come to a unified field theory. That all force and all elementary particles derive from one essence. What is the motivation? The motivation of all sciences is a purely Jewish motivation. Hashem Echad. What's behind all of this research and all of this theory is this deep motivation that we must come to one. It must all come from, we must understand that everything derives from one. So in order to make everything one, in this particular theory there have to be 10 dimensions, and 6 of which are folded up into every point of reality, and therefore we're not aware of 6 of the dimensions, and we're only aware of 4. The 4 being the 3 spatial dimensions and the 1 time dimension. Now all of the other 6 dimensions are folded up, but the different terminology that they use for in every point of existence. They're hidden from us, concealed from us. They're only in the very, very, very small, in the very, very, very microcosm do they appear, the 6 dimensions. But in our eyes, they're concealed. Let's take just once more. Take this particular thought in itself. The 10 divides into 6 and 4. Once more, it's a model. It's a frame. Where does that come from in the Torah? That is simply called the secret of the milui, how the letter Yud is written. When we write the letter Yud as a letter, as a whole letter. So it's written Yud, Vav Dalet. We explain that in Kabbalah, the Vav Dalet is simply the explanation or the revelation of what's innerly potent or pregnant within the Yud, and the milui, the filling in of the letter, equals the root of the letter. as is the case in several of the 22 letters, not in all of them, not in most of them, just in a few of them. And the most important, maybe, is the Yud, that it's filling in. Vav Dalet numerically equals it, and it's saying that these 10 actually break into two categories, one of 6 and the other of 4. That's just a numerical analysis of these, of the simple spelling of the letter Yud, which is the first letter of Hashem's name, Yud Kivav. All right, now to get back to our steps of cosmology, if step number 1 is to create non-substance, which reminds us of the tzimtzum in Kabbalah, to create space and time, and then step number 2, and once all this becomes a slight shift off the initial absolute state of symmetry, that so long as everything is exactly symmetric, everything cancels out everything else. To be symmetric, the pluses equal the minuses, and so everything is uniformly cancelled out, and there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing en od milvado. There's nothing besides He Himself, God Himself. As soon as there's some slight shift off perfect symmetry, it's called some slight asymmetry, then something happens. And the first thing that happens, according to this theory, is space and time. The second thing is that in this setting of space and time, substance enters the scene. And what's more, each one has two facets to it. So this already is a perfect example of Shnai Shem Arba, which also fits and parallels to our basic Kabbalistic structure model, which is the model of the 4-letter name Yud Kei Vav. There are two in the 4-letter name Yud Kei Vav, the two initial letters, first letters Yud and Kei, are called Rein Re'in, the Lo Mitparshin La'almin, two companions that never separate. They're always simultaneously present, one with the other. They're also called father and mother, and relatively they're called time and space. But time in the sense of all time being perceived simultaneously, meaning that there's no yet past, present, future that are differentiated. In the eye of Chokhmah, of Ezu Chacham Haroet Hanolad, once I'm assuming a little bit maybe pre-knowledge of Kabbalistic correspondences, but the Yud of Hashem's name is wisdom. And wisdom is sight, but it's sight of all time as one point. So it's actually above the way we experience time. We experience time that you're only in the present, and the past was, and the future is to be. But the experience of time as we experience space, what is the difference between our experience of time and our experience of space? We can experience space as though it's all here, now, in front of us. Kulam niskarim biskira achat. And a person can have an overview of all of space in one moment. He can see it all. If I could relate to time, I mean, it's all one essence, the time-space, according to Einstein. If I could see time as I see space, so once more I would see it all simultaneously. Past, it would all be like a picture, like a mural on the wall. I have a mural, a big mural across the wall of history, from the beginning of history to the end of history. Who saw time in such a way? Adam. Adam Arishon. Hashem showed him, so the sages teach, saw all of history as a mural on the wall. That vision of time as a unity is the level of wisdom, the Yud of Hashem's name. Space, it says in Mishlei, or in the Yov, in Sefer Yov, it says, Eizeh Mekom Bina. Space is relative to time, as we'll maybe explain in the future, in continuation. Also, one of the beautiful things of Kabbalah and modern science is that Kabbalah is absolutely relativity. It means that concepts are always relative concepts. Every concept except the essence of God Himself, what's called atzmut hamahut, every other concept in the world is relative. Meaning that if I have a concept of male and female, it's relative. That it's male in respect, that one particular aspect is male in respect to another aspect which is female, but that very same thing is female, or may be female, relative to something else. Everything is relative. Akol lefi erchin is the terminology in the traditional text of Kabbalah. So once more, here also, the relative value, when you have time and space together, the time is male within space, which is female, meaning the expanse of space. In other relative frames, once more, the Kabbalah, the thought of Kabbalah is that everything depends on a group. Nothing is to be understood as a prat alone, as an isolated point. If things are related to as isolated points, that creates a state in the soul which is called chaos, tohu. When you relate to things as isolated points, that is a chaotic psyche experience. Things must be related to as partsufim, as sets, as groups. And they assume the relative value is only in relation one to the other. So once more, why am I saying this? Because very often in Kabbalah you will find that time is feminine relative to something else, relative to above time. But if I have time versus space, the concept of time and space, time is the male element, the kav, within space, which is the female. And at this level, if I'm now analyzing these four, say, time and space, energy and matter, and for two that are four, the time and space are one thing, and matter and energy are one thing, according to modern science. But nonetheless, each one has two elements. What is the difference? The difference is that time and space are simultaneously there at the same time, so to speak. Whereas energy and matter are also there as two different entities. If it's the same entity, then it's either in the form of energy or in the form of matter. If it's two different energies, then you have energy and you have matter. The union is not exactly the same. The relative value of time to space corresponds to the first two letters of Hashem's name, which are called Chen Re'in, V'lo mitparshim, I mean two companions that are always there together, always combined together. Chochman, Binah, father and mother. For this level, it's male and female, father and mother. And here, time is not the extent of time, but it's the experience of seeing all of time in one moment. Just like the mural, just like Adam, that was shown all of history in front of him. Also Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, before he passed away, also it said that Hashem showed him all of history as Adam, all in front of him, in one moment. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu is the level of Chokhmah, of the Yud of Hashem's name. All right. Now, what about matter and energy? Matter, energy. What is the word for energy in the Torah? Or light. The first creation. First Hashem created the scene, which is heavens and earth, without yet matter or energy. Then the first thing is light. Light is the ray of light, or in the terminology of Kabbalah, the ray of radiance, of divine immanence, which permeates into the vacuum. That was first created, the setting of creation. Right, so there's light. Light is energy. Energy, mehit abut ha'orot nithavu ha'kelim, is the terminology in Kabbalah and Hasidut. Energy goes through a process of thickening, and when light thickens, it becomes matter. It becomes substance. It becomes kelim. It goes through a thickening process. That is once more exactly what's explained in modern physics to be, this has to do with quantum mechanics, the leap from light, a pure light phenomenon, to a phenomenon of matter like the electron around the hydrogen nucleus. There is a leap that takes place, a hit'abut, a thickening process which takes place, which depends on a number, also maybe the most important, pure number. Pure number is a pure ratio. There's no physical dimensions to it. It doesn't depend on anything which is a decision of man. It's just a pure decision of God. The decision of man means that it has a dimension. It's feet, or it's inches, or it's seconds, or something else. The number is 137. It's called the inverse of the fine structure constant in physics. It's the intermediate, it's the power, the fine structure constant is the power that it serves as an intermediate between C and H, which do have dimensions too. They're not pure numbers. C is the speed of time, the speed of light, and H is Planck's constant, which is the minimal quantum amount of quantum leap in quantum mechanics. And that number, which serves as an intermediate between these two basic numbers of physics, of modern physics. And what is so non-common sense in modern physics is that the concepts, the extreme concepts of infinity versus zero become relative concepts. Infinity becomes the speed of light, and zero becomes Planck's constant in quantum mechanics. These two chidushim, innovations of modern science, produce a multitude, an infinitude of what is absurdities to common sense. That infinity is no longer infinite in our physical world. It has a ceiling value to it. And actually, once infinity itself becomes C, becomes the speed of light. And zero, the physical zero, becomes Planck's constant. These are two extremes, min hakatzeh lakatzeh, from zero to infinity. What is the most beautiful hint in the Torah that infinity really has to do with light, with the speed of light? It's the fact that this may be the initial numerical relation in all of Kabbalah, that the word or, Yehi or, light, let there be light, light equals Ein Sof, infinity. The first equality of all numerical analysis in Kabbalah is the equality of light to infinity. So how do we see that in modern physics?
Do you mean to say that the C on the one end and Planck's constant on the other set limits to the physical world within the infinity from which it was created?
Some other influence. That's part of the tzimtzum, part of the contraction.
So it becomes a subset of the infinity.
Right, of course.
And therefore our limitation in the physical
certainly
world.
our limitations, but what happens is that the whole world becomes non-common sense. Each one of these two constants, which it's not a pure number, as we said before, these are not pure numbers, neither C nor H are pure numbers. But they do set these limits, and they curve our minds altogether, like the curvature of the universe. They curve common sense is straight, and it makes everything, it produces absurdities.
There's an axiom of quantum mechanics that the unit of H is action, and it sounds like something like what you're saying.
Okay, right. That's the dimension. The unit is the dimension. All right. Now, what is the number that combines these two? It's this number which is called the inverse of the fine structure constant, which is 137. Even until the present day, the scientists, the physicists are not clear whether this is exactly 137 or maybe it's just approximately 137. But it's so close to 137 that they can't tell. So we'll take it to be 137. And once more, this is a pure number. It has no units, no dimensions to it. A pure number is a pure ratio. What does it mean physically, this number 137? It means and many, many things. Every quantum relation has to do with this number. But the simplest thing is that this is the drop, the quantum leap from the speed of light to the highest speed of an elementary particle, which is that of the electron in the hydrogen atom. And so the speed of the electron revolving around the nucleus of the hydrogen atom is 1/137 c, the speed of light. Means that light becoming thickened, light turning, energy turning into matter, drops in its speed by 137. What does that number 137 mean for us? That's the word Kabbalah itself. It was already, it's not my chidush, many people have said this ever since this number was discovered. 137, so many people caught on to the gematria that 137 is Kabbalah itself. What does this number mean? This number is an intermediate between C and H. Now let's just say a few words in Chassidut. Chassidut is the service of the soul. In one service of the soul, the Baal Shem Tov teaches us that the person has to first be in a state of submission. It's called Hachna'ah. Then Havdalah. There are three stages of service. The first is called Hachna'ah, submission of self. Becoming as lowly, as selfless, as humble as possible. Then Havdalah, if a person has made himself as low as possible, as nothing as possible, then comes a moment that his divine inner essence reveals itself to himself and he becomes separate. He becomes a newborn babe of consciousness. A dimension of self that was previously concealed from him appears. His true Jewish soul. That's called Havdalah. For instance, in a very practical, simple case, a person is trying to pray, is trying to daven with kavanah, with good intention, but unfortunately he finds himself troubled and being shot at by arrows of machshavos zoros, all kinds of bad foreign matter that's bombing his brain and disturbing his soul and not allowing him to concentrate and to intend with all of his heart on the words of his prayer. So what does he do? And this is the context in which the Baal Shem Tov brings these three stages of service. The first thing that he must do, is lower himself. Become as null as possible. Hachna'ah. If he truly does that, as much as he can, as much as he's able, there will come a moment that he will experience clarity. The state of confusion or bilbul is like a cloudy sky. It is full of clouds in his consciousness. If he's able to lower himself sufficiently, he will experience, when he so merits, ke'etzim hashamayim laTorah, that the sky becomes clear. That clarity is the manifestation in himself of his inner soul that he was not conscious of previously at all. HaNefesh HaShenit. In Tanya, in chapter 2, the classic text of Hasidut Tanya, it says, HaNefesh HaShenit B'Yisrael Chelek Elokim Mamash. That the second soul is the divine soul. Why is it called the second soul, not the first soul? There are many explanations. One of the explanations is that it appears second. It always appears second. One doesn't initially have the awareness of one's own divine soul. It's HaNefesh HaShenit B'Yisrael. When does one merit to reveal or to become conscious of his divine soul? When he becomes as know as he need become. As everyone has his limit, his measure of how know he need become in order to merit the revelation to himself of his divine inner essence. And if all of us, or most of us, our Jewish people go around without awareness and without consciousness of our divine essence, which actually separates ourselves, makes us a chosen people, and separates us from other peoples of the earth. That's because in our psyche we have not yet reached, we have not yet worked on ourselves to reach the sufficient level of hachna'ah, of selflessness, in order to merit the experience, the knowledge, the consciousness of Havdalah, which is separateness. The fact that the experience of Havdalah depends upon Hachna'ah, that automatically eliminates any arrogance whatsoever or any external chauvinism whatsoever in our assumption of our separateness. Because it will never truly reveal itself until we have first nullified ourselves. But that level of nullification, this is step number one is Hachna, step number two is Havdalah, step number three is Hamtaka, sweetening. Havdalah, the manifestation or consciousness of separateness, that's not the end goal of serving God. The end goal of serving God is the ability to sweeten the previous distress and root bitterness of the world, the suffering of the world, the suffering in ourselves, suffering outside of ourselves, throughout the whole world. If we're unable to sweeten bitterness, to transform darkness into light and bitter tastes into sweet tastes, this is the terminology in the Zohar HaKadosh. La'afoch ha'sheicho l'nehero, v'ta'amin meriro l'misko, then we have not yet come to the culmination and the goal of our being created on earth. That's step number three. And in every process, the Baal Shem Tov teaches, this is maybe the deepest and most fundamental teaching of Hasidut, that this is a cycle that goes on in the small and in the large simultaneously. Because every day and every mitzvah, every prayer, one shall go through these three stages in the small of submission, separation, sweetening. Hachna'ah, havdalah, hamtaka. And also in the large, there are long periods of life that one is working on hachna'ah, and that one merits to achieve the sense, the consciousness of havdalah, of separation. And then finally, the messianic consciousness and the messianic revelation, which is redemption, is that of hamtaka, of sweetening, in the large sense of the word, meaning history as a whole. Why did I go through this? Light is sweet, says the verse in Kohelet. Ki matok ha'or. Light represents sweetness. Planck's constant, as we said, is the finite nothing. A person can't really become nothing. Can't become ois, vanish, disappear. But there is the nothing of reality. This is a parable. This is Planck's constant. Quantum is a most beautiful parable, as all of the wisdom of science is intended to be a parable for the psyche, for the soul. And the soul itself is a parable for godliness. It's called a throne. One is a throne for the other. A parable is a throne. That a higher dimension sits on a lower parallel phenomenon. All of nature and all of physics, all insight, all theory of physics is intended to be a throne, a parable for the soul. And the soul itself is a parable, a mashal, and a throne, a kisei kavod for God and godliness. This, in the terminology of the Baal Shem Tov, is called olamot, nishamot, elokut. There are worlds and souls and divinity. And the unification of all is science becoming the true seat for the soul. Meaning that it is the mashal and the soul is the nimshal, and once more it's relative. The soul then becomes the mashal. Mibsari echazeh elokah, from my flesh and from my soul I see the divine. So we said before, male and female. The mashal is the female and the nimshal is the male. The soul relative to nature is male and female. The soul relative to God, the soul is female, is the kala, the bride of the Song of Songs. And God is the groom of the Song of Songs. And so once more, the speed light is a sweet, is the epitome of sweetness. Himato ka'or. Planck's constant is a beautiful parable for actual nothingness. For zero, which is something. It's just physically, it's zero. To reach your 0 point, which is hachna'ah, is to reach H in physics. To reach hamtaka, once more messianic consciousness, is to be traveling at the speed of light. When you're above time, everything becomes sweet. What is the intermediate? The intermediate is the manifestation of the soul, of the clarity, the clearing away of the clouds in the cloudy sky. That is this intermediate number, which is a pure number once more, and thereby is in a certain way more important than even the others. The other two, this number 137, which is the intermediate between H and C. And once more, what is the simple thing that it does in physics? It takes light, it takes orot, and it makes them into vessels. It takes light and makes them into vessels. That the term for which is hitabut ha'orot nitavu ha'kelim. That from the thickening of the lights come into existence vessels. Vessels in which matter is concentrated energy. This is a pure statement out of Kabbalah, which is exactly E equals mc squared. That matter is concentrated energy. Now, energy and matter are this duality of energy and matter are the last two letters of God's name, Vav and He. Once more, this is just a simple, immediate example of what it means to meditate in Kabbalah on the way science now understands the simplest understanding of our world. That there are two hidden dimensions, so to speak, which are actually 4 dimensions or more, 10 dimensions, of the setting of reality, which are basically time and space. And they go together, but they're not exactly the same, but they always appear together. That is the Yud and the Hey of Hashem's name. When things become substantial, that's called non-substance. Hanistarot Hashem Elokeinu. Concealed from us. Untangible. To be tangible is energy and matter. But energy is still much finer than is matter. The energy is the kav, the ray of light that penetrates into the setting of space and time. That's the vav of Hashem's name. And matter itself is malchut, kingdom, the last hay of Hashem's name. And this is for those that a little bit are familiar with the most basic frame of reference is Yud Kei Vav. Now all of these four things, which we now said parallels to Yud Kei Vav Kei, these are still just the first two stages of the four-stage cosmology of string theory. First, one slight asymmetry which creates or emanates space and time. A second asymmetry which brings substance. Much more substance has these two phases to it of energy and matter. Then the third thing is called they call it the great inflation, that's quote unquote. That all of a sudden, the time and space expands to the measure of 10 to the 50th. This is the hypothesis, once more. Everything in cosmology is all based upon hypotheses in order to make things work the way that we would like to see them work, come out. So the hypothesis is that after the first two asymmetries, there momentarily, instantaneously happens a phenomenon which is called the great inflation, that the universe expands 10 to the 50th. Then, in one point, they do not call it the central point, but in Kabbalah it would be called, because it's a term straight out of Kabbalah, Nekudayim Tzayid. In one point of this expanded pre-universe takes place what we all have heard of, this phenomenon that's called the Big Bang, which now becomes, instead of stage number 1, it now becomes stage number 4. And from the Big Bang, then things start to proceed relatively slowly. The world begins to cool down as things expand relatively slowly, and it's all taking place in one point of that 10 to the 50th inflation of the universe. Things cool down and develop little by little. And once more, things fall. The universe in this point, which has now become the Big Bang, that's all of what we probably heard of, the expanding universe. All our expanding universe is just the expanding universe of that point that the Big Bang took place in. And things once more cool down and develop little by little, and the asymmetry goes on and on. And what the result is the world that we see. Right now, these four stages themselves classically, I can't do this too much at length, also classically correspond in the conceptual process and sequence of events is a beautiful sequence of events that is just like, once more, Yud Kei Vav Kei. The previous Yud Kei Vav Kei that we described would now be a Yud Kei Vav Kei just within the first two letters of Yud and Hey. The first letter Yud is now the initial emanation of space-time. Then comes Yesh, substance. Once more, the creation of non-substance, and then the creation of the initial substance, the energy matter within the space-time. So now instead of these being four, we'll just take them to be two. So once more, there's a classic example of how the frame of reference changes. That in the initial Yud Kei, we identified Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now those two become Yud-K relative to these other two states. But this is a conception. Why? Once more, to try to understand why I'm doing this. Not because I necessarily even believe in this theory. Because nobody knows if this theory is true or not. I'm not now believing in this theory. I believe in the Kabbalah, not in this theory. But this theory for me is a beautiful example of how a thought process, how scientists nowadays are thinking in a way which parallels Kabbalistic process. Most beautifully parallels. So it's not right now important even whether the theory is right or wrong. It's just that the thought of man, these are thoughts of men, that human beings are thinking in a way which is most close to the way the Torah and Kabbalah thinks. That's what's important. But eventually we'll know what's true and what's not true. But the very fact that people are thinking in such a way, in such a manner that it resembles closely the thinking process, the logic of Torah bichlal in general and Kabbalah in particular, this is an amazing advance and progress in the world and civilization. So let's just conclude this part of the idea that the initial creation, step number one, which is to emanate time-space, that's the Yud of Hashem's name. Step number two, that's called non-substance. Then substance, yesh, in Kabbalah, the relative value between Chokhmah and Binah is called ayin v'yesh. Nothing and something. Ha-Chokhmah me ayin timati, meaning that Chokhmah itself is the creation of nothing. Is the emanation of time-space, which is the non-substance, the basis, the scene in which substantial, tangible creation goes on to take place. Binah, the second letter, Hey, is called Yesh, relative to Chokhmah, which is Ayin. It means that something now happens. It's like a mother that becomes pregnant. That some substance begins to manifest itself and begins to develop itself. That's the Hey, the first Hey of Hashem's name. Then what happens, the stage that they call it the great inflation, that space spreads in all directions, that the universe expands 10 to the 50. What is that? How can that be understood as the next stage in Hashem's name? Because the Vav, the third letter, is often, or most often, in Kabbalah understood to be the Vav K'tzavot, meaning the 6 extremities of expanse. Called the Vav K'tzavology of Kabbalah, meaning that everything expands. Then this big bang, which is a explosion initially, and then a cooling down and slow development process, historic process of the world as we know it. Once more, we're taught in Kabbalah that Malchut breaks and explodes, and the result of which is the universe as we know it. And it's called, actually, the Malchut is the middle point of the previous expanse. Once more, in the way that the string people say, the string is, so they say that at some point, and they don't know where it is, at some point in this pre-universe, that our universe begins with a big bang, with an explosion, and then that point begins to expand itself, and that's the expanding universe that the cosmologists talk about. And for those that are familiar, a little bit familiar with the fundamentals of Kabbalah, this is exactly what goes on in Malchut. The Malchut is one point inside, it's usually called the middle point, inside the expanse, the previous expanse, inflation, and that point breaks or explodes. Ana Emloch. It's called the thought of I shall rule. That thought is produce an explosion in this one point in the middle. And then all of history is what happens in that point that is exploded. that point of matter and space now all together that is exploded, and now history is the continuation of that. So there's now another most beautiful example to take a thought process of science and make it correspond, which is the meaning of Kabbalah, seeing how it parallels so beautifully to the basic model or thought process of Kabbalah. The basic model is the model of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav. And it's a most beautiful parallel. So this is point number one of it now. What, did you want to add something?
As you describe the process, it's sequential. I don't know if you intended, but it sounds to me sequential. One thing happening after another.
That's what I'm trying to explain.
Which
that these people are, and they're inventing this theory once more. But the fact that they're thinking this way, that's what's so attractive and nice in my...
Because it's sequential, it seems to have direction.
Right.
Which is an asymmetry.
Right.
Which has the meaning to me, either the symmetry will be restored over time, or over whatever dimensions asymmetry is occurring. I don't know if time is the right word. But there is an asymmetry because of the sequence.
Right.
Will this and this asymmetry has produced effects.
So that's exactly what we're not going to continue talking about.
Okay.
So that's the...
Forgive me.
Yeah. Anything else at this point?
Just sort of some perceptions of what you're talking about, because I've heard some ideas in different forms, but not in the framework of Kabbalah. I guess I'm a little confused from the idea of impregnation. And you're describing a process, it seems to me, of impregnation and illumination, or birth, creation, and it appears to me that part of this process is actually even experiential, not just necessarily could be at a personal level, or could be at many different levels. And I assume that the attraction to steep more deeply into Kabbalah is to become aware of the process and make it more experiential, not just a intellectual exercise. I guess I'm a little bit confused about, maybe you'll talk about it, about I'm not sure what the asymmetry is, or what's bringing it, what's propagating it, and really how it compares with what created the symmetry. You explain the symmetry part, I think, fairly well, but what created the asymmetry, and what is its process? And I'll just leave that down.
Okay. It's also part of the continuation. Anything else, just for the sake of resting? Any other question? Rest is one of the principles of creation. It's a great principle.
I guess there's a lot that I didn't understand, but rather than looking at the bigger picture, maybe I'll just pick out a couple of details. And one is, when you talked about time and space and them being male and female, masculine and feminine, and I don't have any relationship in my mind of time and space and masculine and feminine, how those can relate to each other. That's one thing. Second thing, when you're talking about on an individual or personal level, the submission, the separation, and the sweetening. The submission and the sweetening, I think I could understand. The separation, I'm not sure what you're talking about there. And there's one third thing, and I think that'll be it for me. And that is, and it's not really something you dealt with, but I'm thinking, all this, the way that you're looking at this, how does that help? Can that help us understand what Hashem is? Does that help us get a perspective on what Hashem is?
Let's start from the end. Certainly, the whole idea is that one is a parable for the other, one is a seed for the other.
Mm-hmm.
all of meditation, all of Kabbalah is for the sake, before it was said for the sake of making it more experiential. It is not that the experience is the experience of myself even. That's also just a means. In contrast to other spiritualistic ways. The end is, as you said right now, is to know God, godliness. The tachlit, the purpose and goal is to become close to the infinite, to the absolute infinite, to the creator. And nature is a seat for the psyche, for the soul. And the soul is a seat to experience God, to perceive God. And that was the end. I already forgot the...
time and space, masculine and feminine.
Right, time and space. If I consider the initial Tzimtzum contraction to be a vacuum, then a ray of light penetrates into the vacuum. That idiom or that symbol is a male-female symbol. Meaning that the way to conceive is that time comes into space. Time is light which permeates space. It's a ray that doesn't just shine into the room, but it gives the room direction, or it makes the room expand. What is time? To speak it, to understand it physically, the way that nowadays it's understood. Time is simply the power that makes the universe, everything, the time, space as a whole expand. This concept expanding universe. It's as though there's space, and there's some force that comes into a small space, which forces energy, some light, but not physical light, not yet light that's become matter. A more subtle form of light that comes into the small space and makes it expand. That's time permeating space. And that's why it's a male-female relation. The time is impregnating space. And to say it even simpler, the female is considered to be the ground, the karka olam, reality, first reality. What is given, or what permeates that first reality in order to make it develop and grow, or to grow within it, that's time in relation to space. And what was the first one?
And the first one was the separation, the middle part of the sweetness and the submission.
The sweetening, in order to sweeten, there has to be someone that's able to sweeten. It says that ein chavush matir tasum bet asrimei. Somebody that's imprisoned in a prison can't get himself out. If he does not manifest a power from above, or a power from above comes to reside in him, he can't. If somebody is suffering, he can't sweeten the suffering himself. If somebody is sick, he has to go to a doctor. The separation is that I myself become the doctor that is capable of healing the sickness of the world. The experience of submission is that I am the patient, I'm the sick one. And the separation is that actually I'm also the doctor. I have been gifted with the gift to heal, and not everybody's a doctor. We, the Jewish people, are the doctors of the world. And then to go on to heal the world, the suffering world, that's the sweeten. The doctor is not to sit at home, but the doctor is to go out to his patients and to heal his patients. That's submission and separation and sweeten. All right, now let's go on. All of this that we said up until now. Maybe one more question.
Yeah. Okay, given the structures that you described to us intellectually, that they have obviously a spiritual component, are you saying that given the time-space continuum, that there's a physics formula for when all the world will perceive that the light of Mashiach is here. Is there a physical formula for this? Is that what you're saying? That everything is really physics?
I'm saying that physics, if understood properly, is a perfect model, a perfect parable for what goes on in the soul. And what goes on in the soul is a parable for godliness.
And are you saying that within Kabbalah, there's some intellectual understanding of the light, I don't know if I want to say formula, but you were using light and how it emanates into the world. And I've noticed when I'm in Israel, the light in Jerusalem, to my physical eye, is very different than anything I've ever seen in the world. When this light is all over the world in the same sense, is this when Mashiach is going to be here?
Right, I guess so, I hope so. But if you see the light, you should be there. I don't know what you're doing. Unless you're bringing the light down here to shine it to other people. To sweeten with your light from Jerusalem, to sweeten Palo Alto. Okay, so this up until now was all the first aspiration of modern science, which is a truly and essentially Jewish aspiration, which is actually in the Torah called Ma'aseh Breshit. To go back and to look for unity by trying to conceive of the stages of creation. And the stages of creation must correspond. This is what Hashem's name means, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. As explained in Tanya also, it means continual, the process of bringing into being. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei means coming or bringing into being, into existence. In the 4 stages of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, this was all step chapter number 1 in our 3-chapter discussion, which is Hashem Echad. We're trying to come to Achdut, to unity, like a unified field theory. And the way we do it is by meditating upon creation and trying to go back to the time when really everything was one, and then to be able to understand that it's all coming from one. And as we'll see in the end, that's what was asked before, it will all return to oneness in even a higher manner, a more paradoxical manner than it assumed in its initial point of outset. Number 2 was another great chidush of modern science, that things depend, process and reality depends upon consciousness. This is most pronounced in the famous uncertainty principle, that based on observation, on measurement, on human consciousness, one cannot be simultaneously aware, say, of position and momentum of an elementary particle. But even more deeply, scientists are more and more from beginning with the uncertainty principle and going on from that, are more and more becoming convinced that really reality depends on consciousness. And there are many, many different opinions of these are secular scientists that do not yet believe in God, but they do believe that there is some consciousness that is necessary for things to take place. And how they define it, there are many, many different hypotheses and ways of defining it. But the very concept that reality depends upon consciousness, this is a great chidush. Now, how is this stated in Torah? This is obvious. The consciousness is that of God. A Jewish soul is also, when revealed, as we said before, a chelek elokah mimah mamash, a part, an aspect, dimension of God. And it also is intended to be a shutaf b'maseh breshit, a partner with God in creation through its rectified consciousness. Its consciousness creates. And so I'll try to make it short. Maybe we'll come back to this. This is point number 2. Point number 2 is that modern science is coming more and more to understand and affirm that reality depends upon consciousness. There's a great, great breakthrough in thought. Let's say, what is the basic nafkamina, the basic difference of the way we perceive the world if reality depends upon consciousness or if it doesn't depend upon consciousness, as previously thought. If reality does not depend upon consciousness, then basically everything is deterministic and causal. It's all just one big evolution of cause and effect. If reality does as was believed, if reality does depend upon consciousness, then reality is always being determined anew by that consciousness. Meaning that there's some choice process, some free will, some free choice process that is determining every moment what's going to be. And it's not all predetermined. Now, if that consciousness is not just God from without, but as well God from within, so that means that I also have free choice. And I can really change reality. Once more, this, beginning from the uncertainty principle on, the more the world is understood to be dependent upon consciousness, the more we are coming to realize the essence, the truth of free choice, of free will. First, that of the total consciousness, which is that of God, the Creator. And as that part of God from within me that also has the power to choose freely. And I'm not predetermined. The world is not fatalistic. So there's a great, great breakthrough of science that is coming close, very, very close and proximate to our faith. Because lahavdil, other ways and other philosophies are themselves deterministic and fatalistic. One of the great things of our Torah is that our Torah is based upon Bechira Choshit. And in modern science, that's exactly what we're coming to understand. This is point number 2. Point number 3 is what we called before the rest principle. That things are always descending and falling like a waterfall, like water descends. It searches, it seeks its lowest ground level. In the same way as water, so the whole universe flows down and seeks the lowest energy level, meaning rest. Everything wants to rest. Everything wants to come to Shabbat. Well, first of all, why did I explain or mention these 3 concepts of science in this particular order? Because the order itself had meaning to me. The first one was the search for unity entails going back into the distant past, as it were. Cosmology. How was the world created in the beginning? Consciousness is the power of the present moment. The non-deterministic power that every second things can change in an unpredictable way. So insight number 2 of modern science is the power of the present. That's the free choice principle. Whereas principle number 3 is that everything is trying to come to a state of rest. It's going down to its lowest energy level. Not to work. We see that that's exactly what society is trying to do. How to work as little as possible. This is the principle, the rest principle. To do it all in your office, all with fax machines and so forth, and don't do anything by yourself. This is principle number 3 of modern physics. The rest principle, the search for lowest energy level. How to do it all on your couch, lying down. This is to understand or to relate to this properly, this is the future. This is Shabbat, Melucha l'Chayei Olamim. So actually, once more, the logic in my mind behind these 3 principles was that this is the way the soul searches back into the primordial past, and the way the soul is intended to experience the present moment, and the way the soul strives for its future paradise, Olam Haba, which is actually identical with this concept of lowest energy level. Now let's talk a few words about what that means, lowest energy level, and the water falling to the ground. This is not just entropy. This is a much more general principle in science and entropy. The fact that, as we said before, entropy doesn't mean that in one split second all of a sudden the world could, if it's not yet at its lowest energy level, it could fall into a different world altogether. Just like going through a black hole. If it would come out in 1 second, the whole universe would be a different universe, at a totally lower energy level. There's way, way more than just the principle of entropy in the present framework of the universe. That passion for reaching the lowest point, once more the terminology, the lowest world, the terminology of Hasidut, that's called Tachton, she'en Tachton lemata mimeno. The lowest energy level, that there's no lower energy level than that, and the passion to reach that, this is exactly and most beautifully the most famous phrase of our sages. And in Kabbalah and Hasidut, what is the future that Hashem has in mind and wanted and desired, had a passion? For what reason did he create the universe? Because he had a passion to dwell below. In the cycle of the year, this month is the last month of the year, Chodesh Adar. In the lunar cycle, the first month is Nisan, the last month is Adar. The word Adar means, amongst other things, I shall dwell. Adar, Dira Batachtonim. Where do I dwell? At the end. The end is also the lowest point. The end of the creation process, which means the ultimate future, for what reason the world was created, is in order for God himself, as it were, to descend all the way down and to dwell and reveal himself in his very essence and being in the lowest energy level of reality, which is essentially he himself at his, as it were, lowest energy level in this terminology of science and physics. So once more, this is called Dira Batachtonim, this principle. If I would translate these 3 insights of modern science into Torah terminology, the second one is the principle of Bechira Choshit, the free choice. The third is the Tachlit HaKavanah, called the purpose of creation, which is Dira Batachtonim, to reach the lowest level, and there to dwell in an eternal dwelling, an eternal rest. Dira Batachtonim. The first is itself Maaseh Breshit Rachdut, that everything is coming from one, and everything will also return to a one at an even higher level. But the oneness of the beginning, the oneness of the essence, and then the effect of consciousness on every moment of the process, And then third, what is the purpose of it all? The purpose of it all is this concept, dira b'tachtonim. These are these three basic insights of science that so beautifully and exactly correspond to our faith. And really, these are three simple things. If we'll just think about it, it's really none of them, in their essence, are so manifest, lahavdil, in any other spiritual way. And just to say the last one, dirabatan, no one, in no way conceives of the passion to be below, down, all the way down. Just the aspiration to ascend. It's a simple concept. Only in our Torah is there this truth that reality is all a downward, a purposeful downward motion. And the tachlis is all the way down. And we said before that amongst physicists there's a difference of opinion whether we are our world is already at its lowest level or not. Even in Kabbalah, there are certain opinions of great early works of Kabbalah that there are worlds below, there are 7 worlds below this world. And there's still where to fall. Comes the Sefer Tanya that we quoted before, the classic work of Hasidut, and there he says, he uses this expression that we quoted before. He says, this world is tachton she'en tachton lemata mimen. This world is already the lowest world, that there's nothing lower than here. And since there's nothing lower than here, it's already ready for the end purpose of creation, which is dira b'tachtonim. Like this, the teaching of this month, Adar, that I shall dwell, and where shall I dwell? In the lowest place. If there's any place lower than this place, then we have a problem. But if we can say and know that this is the lowest of all places, then we're doing okay. Then ot Mashiach kumt. Then Mashiach can come techov u'miyad mamish, because we've already reached the lowest energy level that Hashem seeks to reveal Himself in.
I'm just curious, since you brought up this point, how infallible are these some of the declarations made in the teachings? I mean, I'm thinking of some caution because of some conflicts I've read in other writings that explain Torah Umada, Torah and science, where based on the teachings of their times, they've come to declarations about the universe or perceptions of the constructs and models used to clarify certain thoughts that were not developed enough. So seems to be some. Do you believe that this world is the lowest, just because it's written, or are there some other exchanges among some of the sages?
From the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov on, there's no differences. Maybe before there were still lower worlds to reach, but now we've already reached it, so now there is really no other opinion in this respect. As far as other concepts, there are still, or there were, even at the time of the Baal Shem Tov, there were differences of opinion, as we even mentioned before, whether the contraction is meant to be taken literally or not meant to be taken literally. That has tremendous implication, infinite implication and ramification, whether it's literal or not. As far as this statement goes, so to the best of my knowledge, there's no difference of opinion from that point on. But of course, everything must be studied in itself. All of these declarations are not declarations of human intelligence. These are declarations of Ruach HaKodesh. There were many opinions that were stated even in great Kabbalistic works before the Arizal. And the Arizal said that even for several hundred years, there was a span that Kabbalah was taught and thought and developed, that he said it was not Ruach HaKodesh from heaven. And his new revelation, the Ari HaKadosh, is purely and clearly, almost obviously, that this is for a simple person, this is a new revelation altogether. The same is true of the Baal Shem Tov. And after the Arizal, nobody in the world disagrees with the other. No sage, no source disagrees. There still remains some problems how to interpret different concepts of the Arizal, like Tzimtzum is the classic example. That's the concept of the Arizal, how to interpret whether it should be interpreted literally or not literally. For the most part, except for the few controversies, if something is stated by the Baal Shem Tov or by the Balatanya, so there's no controversy on these things at all. It doesn't mean that we can't understand them. The whole beauty of science is that science gives us tools and implements to understand these things. We have merited to have these implements, these tools to understand things 1,000,000 times better than people a generation ago, if we just devote ourselves to it properly. We have all of these beautiful tools and beautiful insights of science itself, psychology also, that makes it much, much easier to understand the deep secrets that are taught in Kabbalah and Chassidut. So let me just finish the whole trend of thought. Put it all together and actually answer your question that you asked before. There's a famous midrash of Chazal about creation. It says that in creation, or before creation, two attributes disagreed with one another and argued before God. They were the attributes of truth versus kindness. Emet versus chesed. That Emet said to God, don't create the world. Chas v'sholom, don't create the world, because the world is full of deceit, it's full of sheker. The world is a incarnation of deceit. It itself is alma deshikro. It's deceit. Came chesed, and chesed, the attribute of kindness and love, disagreed before God. And Chesed said, create the world, because the whole world stands and is full of kindness. Depends, its very ongoing existence depends on acts of loving kindness. Because only if there is a world which is not true, does that necessitate my essence to become manifest, which is loving kindness, because that world which is not true will not be able to exist for one moment without loving kindness at every level. So what did God do? God heard both claims, and he took emet in his hand, as it were. He took truth in his hand and thrust it down, threw it away, thrust it down into the earth, and he created the world with kindness, with loving kindness, as it says, Olam Chesed Yibameh. The world, the universe, is constructed, is built, is created from kindness. But what happened to Emet? Emet remained a seed buried deep in reality. And now that Emet has to grow, sprout out of the earth of reality, which is created only by chesed, only by kindness, and not from truth. What is this all? How do we translate this whole midrash into the structure of thought that we have now spoken of today? Chesed is water. It's called the water principle in Kabbalah. Water is just that concept of desire to descend to the lowest possible reality. or in the terminology of Kabbalah and Chasidah, koach ha'amshachah milamala lamata. That which always descends from up to down and seeks its tachlis is the lowest point. That is chesed, kindness, which is water. Emet, what is emet? Emet is true symmetry. The question was asked before, what is the force behind the first asymmetry? Ma pitom in Hebrew. Was epis, ma pitom, that if everything is perfectly symmetric, which means that everything is cancelled out, there's no reality except for God. Hashem Elokim Emet. God is the one and only truth. And He is the one and only existence, manifest existence. What happens? What sparks, what triggers the first asymmetry? So this Medrash tells us what does that. That's chesed. Asymmetry is the product of kindness objecting to the eternity of truth. That perfect initial symmetry, that's the midah of emet, which is actually the property of fire. The symmetry is represented in Kabbalah by the letter shin, which is the letter of fire. Water, which is chesed, is represented by the letter mem. Consciousness by the letter aleph. Is another, what I'm now saying in short, is another great foundation of Kabbalah. That there are three called mother letters which create the balance and equilibrium of all being. They are the aleph in the middle, and the shin ascends from the heart to the head, heatens the head, it's fire, and water descends into the abdomen and below, all the way down. That's why the basic structure of man, it's called the Tzedem Elokim in Kabbalah, is that there's the aleph, which represents air in the lungs in the middle of existence, and fire shoots up to the head, and water descends down into the stomach, into the abdomen. This is the basic frame of reference of man in relation to these three elements, or three mother letters, aleph, mem, and shin. As we said before, science itself, in searching for unity, searches for heat. One of the points we made at the very beginning. The primordial unity only manifests itself in tremendous, tremendous fire. And the more that I can burn up reality, the more I return to the perfect symmetry of everything being one and the same. That's the head. As rising to the head is rising to the beginning, looking into the beginning, studying cosmology. That's the shin principle, the fire principle, which is the symmetry principle. Once more, the shin represents symmetry. And that ascends upward into the head. The present, the ever-present, is the consciousness of the aleph, which means aleph, ha-chokhmah. Consciousness, new consciousness is called aleph. New insight, ever ongoing new insight. The water principle is the principle that falls down into the abdomen below. That's called the water, which is chesed. So God is actually the consciousness. And the consciousness, like the aleph, is also considered to be alufo sh'olam. The absolute consciousness chooses the water over the fire, but takes that essence of fire and thrusts it down into the world of water, the universe of water. But once more, water is making things asymmetric, an ongoing asymmetric process. And now the tachlis is that emet me'eretz titzmach. That's the famous verse in Psalms. The truth must now grow out and sprout out of the earth, because God had taken it and thrust it down into reality. Seemingly he had relinquished it and rejected it and negated it. But in truth, he had thrust it down to sow it into the earth that's created by chesed. And in the end, it will grow out of the earth. This is exactly now the answer to the question was asked before. What's going to be at the end? At the end, the truth, which is the ultimate unity, will exist in the lowest, in its rest, lowest energy level. And paradoxically, the symmetry will shine out of the asymmetry, which will not become nullified. The world continues to exist in its tzimtzum, in its asymmetry, but the symmetry will shine, will grow and sprout out of that asymmetry. Now, in order to create the world, the water had to put out the fire. Just like in simple nature, water extinguishes fire. Chesed had to extinguish emet. But the ultimate end will be that the fire will come out of the water. Meaning that the symmetry and the absolute unity, and this is a paradoxical unity. What is also the simple concept of what can possibly be the purpose of creation? What is more one than one? Obviously, our faith is one. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What can be more one than one? It already was one. What can be accomplished by creating an asymmetric, pluralistic reality? What can that do for oneness? What purpose can that achieve for the absolute one? And the answer is that it can only achieve that the passion of the absolute one itself is to reveal itself as even more absolute by the fact that it appears in a setting paradoxically which is asymmetric. Let's say it another way. We have symmetry and we have asymmetry, which is sequence, like you said, a sequence of events, direction, a vector force. It's asymmetric. So asymmetry is not symmetry. What is the ultimate passion? The passion is to show that symmetry versus asymmetry is also symmetric.
Do that again.
You have a concept, symmetry, and all of a sudden it breaks apart, symmetry. It starts to become asymmetric, and there's a process of creation. Water falls down, 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 all the way down. When it comes to rest, and the essence of the Creator is revealed from within His creation, that's called dirabat atumim, His passion to reveal Himself at the lowest possible level. So all of a sudden, the symmetry reaches an infinitely, paradoxically higher state that before it was just symmetry itself. Here's one and here's one. There's an axis in the middle. It's all one. But if something is off, symmetry is chen in Hebrew. Chen is grace, gracefulness, beauty. One of the 8 synonyms for the concept beauty in the Torah. Actually, the last of the 8. In the Torah, there are 8 synonyms for beauty, which correspond to the 8 days of Hanukkah, the candles of Hanukkah. The last is called chen, the beauty of Malchut, symmetry. As we know in art, sometimes the most beautiful point of a face is a dimple or a point which is asymmetric, which doesn't have a corresponding point on the other side. Because all art knows that if there's not a little asymmetry, you don't achieve true beauty. But the human psyche, the human soul experiences true beauty. It's almost symmetric, but it's a little bit off. The paradox of the future is that the symmetry, once more, we had here a medrash that said there is God and he has two attributes. So that itself is no good for us. We're Jews, we don't believe in things that except God. What does that mean, that there's God and there he has a truth and he has chesed? It sounds something not from us. So that can't remain. Can't remain that you have God and another two. Even though he's in control. It doesn't matter that he's in control. We want it all to be one. So actually the unity before creation was such a unity that it permitted the appearance of this controversy, as it were, between Emet and Chesed. But the final unity will be such that the symmetry, in quote, now symmetry in quotation marks, not the original symmetry, meaning that the total unity will be that the previous symmetry and the asymmetry and God himself, the consciousness, is all absolutely one. And that asymmetry is not one. But the asymmetry itself is actually the setting, what's more, the dira, the dwelling place for the absolute one. Meaning that the symmetry and the asymmetry will reach a higher, super meta symmetry. That's the tachlit ha-kavanah of dira b'tachtonim, that emet mi'eret yitzmach, that the truth will sprout out of the world which is created by its very opposite. And that was the idea. Yes.
I have two questions. Only two. Is it our job as Jews and as humans to help, as it were, emet, to sprout and flourish and grow back in the midst of the water? Is that part of our job as shofet, as partners? Our job as partners.
A Jew has two things to do in the world. He has to learn to identify with the Torah and to do good deeds. There are certain Jews, as it is taught in Chasidoth, in Musar, not just in Chasidoth, but certain Jewish souls that primarily their purpose in life is Torah. And there are other Jews, but primarily their purpose in life is more chesed, to do acts of charity and good deeds. It's like Yitzchak and Zvulun. Yitzchak are the students, and Zvulun are the